Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, folks. Welcome back. Honestly, I hope everyone's safe, and I know how crazy all of this stuff is, but the only thing we have is to move forward, right? So this is the Cliff Notes for lecture number 9, Prisons and Long-Term Confinement. What I want you to get out of this lecture, first of all, is the distinction between prisons and jails. Again, a very important distinction. Prisons, pretty straightforward. You've been convicted of a felony offense. This is post-adjudication. This is something that you're there long-term. You're there for more than a year, and this is why prisons, if you take a look at the lectures, you're going to see a map of New York State, and you're going to look at all of the prisons. The closest maximum security facility to New York City is Sing Sing Correctional Facility, and it's about an hour and a half drive away from New York. The reason for that is because it's post-adjudication. If you're going away for 5 years, it doesn't matter if you're 8-hour drive away. So that's what matters most there, compared to jails, obviously, which have to be close to the court system. To be considered for this lecture is that second slide where I'm talking about, if you're a prison superintendent, this is like related back to your the papers. If you're a prison superintendent, you know, your main concern is to keep prisoners busy, is to keep them from doing bad things, because as the saying goes, idle hands are the playground of the devil. And so I wanted you to be able to consider that. There's a lot of the materials, just kind of a look at what it's like to be a corrections officer, how many facilities there are, but most importantly is, you know, the fact that most prisons are state facilities, and again, I want to really drive this point home that, like, you'll never see the word prison on a prison. All prisons are correctional facilities. They're designed to correct, and so please pay attention to the lectures. Please pay attention to the idea that 88% of all prisons are state facilities. You commit a crime, you're most likely committing a state offense. And this is why, like, if you go to Louisiana for spring break, honk, honk, that's not happening. If you go to Louisiana and you commit a crime, guess where you're going to serve your prison time? In Louisiana. Even if you're a New York State resident, it doesn't matter. You'll do 8 years or whatever in Louisiana State correctional facility because you violated their laws. That's what this is all about. So generally speaking, for the discussion, I wanted to ask about the right type of prison programs. Overall, and this is actually related to the case study as well for Otis Johnson, I'm kind of asking, what would it take for a prisoner to survive in this world? And I like doing that, but I usually, if this were a class, I would teach it this way, that, like, imagine that you're a billionaire. Okay, just use your imagination. Imagine that you're a billionaire and your favorite cousin just came out of prison. What would you give to that cousin? And I've been doing this for years, and I usually don't tell students what I'm doing before I ask that question. And it's fun to listen to students be like, oh, I'll set them up with a place to live. I'll set them up with a job. I'll give them a little bit of spending money. I'll make sure they have good transportation. I'll set them up with a computer. Maybe I'll even, like, get them a car or something like that. I'll take care of them. And, most students kind of lean towards, like, taking care of them for the first few months and then making sure that they can go off on their own career, giving them job trainings, giving them therapy, etc. This is what you would provide for your favorite cousin. And the reality is that this is what all prisoners need when they leave. And this is why it's such a hard sell, because all that stuff costs a lot of money. But this is, in reality, this is what prisoners need in order to survive in society. And this is why we have an 80% recidivism rate for those, for adult males that come out of prison. 80% of adult males, upon release from prison, will commit a new crime within 36 months, within 3 years. That is a real stat, and that's a nationwide stat. And there's a reason for that, because we're not giving prisoners what they need on the way out. Although it's hard, it's a difficult sell to give prisoners what they need on the way out, because people are like, oh, these are criminals. These are the worst parts of society. Why should we give them anything? Let them suffer. guess what that suffering does? That suffering leads to them having to go outside of the legal economy in order to survive. So, it kind of is what it is. So again, please pay attention to that video, the case study video for Otis Johnson. Just to let you know, I've met Otis. I've interviewed him, and he's still doesn't admit that he was the guy that assaulted the police officer. And I believe him, because somebody fired a gun at a police officer. They ran throughout Harlem for the rest of the day looking for a black male in a tan jacket. They came across a black male in a tan jacket, and they sent him to prison for 44 years. It is what it is. So, but being 44 years removed from society, I like that video because you could just see his reaction at Times Square. So imagine all the other things that he missed out on, and how is he supposed to survive in this world? That's something I want you guys to consider. Just as a side note, if you don't know what recidivism means, recidivism literally means a return to crime, and recidivism has to follow 4 steps. One, you commit a crime. 2, you go to prison. 3, you finish your prison sentence, you come back into the community, and then number 4, you commit a new crime. That's recidivism. And so we have an 80% recidivism rate for adult men in the United States, which you could take that as a reflection, if you want, of our criminal justice system. So all of this work, review the lecture. The 2 discussions are due this Friday by 5 p.m., April 3rd. Business as usual for the semester. Honestly, this is the only thing I know how to do. So please stay on top of the lectures. I should have your midterms graded by next week. Thank you all for submitting your midterm exams. And that's it. I'll see you guys next week. Take care.